Have you ever felt like life was rigged? Not in a small way. Not bad luck rigged. I mean rigged at the root. Like no matter how hard you try to wake up, something keeps pulling you back to sleep. Like every time you get close to real freedom, real clarity, real peace, something inside you or around you tightens the leash again. You're not imagining that. Almost 2,000 years ago, a group of people had that exact same feeling. And instead of shrugging it off, they gave it a name. They called it the Archons. I'm not going to give you the watered-down version today. I'm going to give you the real story, the one that got people killed for even writing it down. Because once you understand what the Archons actually are, you will never look at your own mind the same way again. Stay with me, because by the end of this, you're going to realize the prison isn't out there. It's a lot closer than that. Let's strip away the mystery for a second, because I don't want this to feel like some vague, spooky legend. I want you to actually understand it. In Gnostic teaching, the Archons are described as rulers. Not kings with crowns. Rulers of the material world itself, the fabric of matter, time, and law that everything physical operates inside of. Think of them less like beings with faces and more like forces. Wardens. The word Archon literally comes from a Greek root meaning ruler or chief. And in this tradition, these rulers didn't create the universe out of love. They built it as something closer to a holding cell. Now here's my honest opinion on this, and I want to say it plainly. I don't think this idea is just an old myth people made up to explain suffering. I think it's one of the most psychologically accurate metaphors ever written down. Because when you strip away the ancient language, what they're describing is control. Systems that keep a soul distracted, afraid, and small, so it never remembers what it actually is. You felt this. Everyone has. That moment where you're doing everything right, working, achieving, scrolling, striving, and you still feel like you're circling the same drain. Like something built the loop on purpose. That feeling is exactly what the Gnostics were pointing at. But here's where it gets strange. Because this wasn't just philosophy to them. They believed this was architecture. Layers. Levels. A structure built specifically to keep something in. Here's something most people never get taught in school. For a long time, this knowledge wasn't just unpopular, it was dangerous. People didn't just disagree with these ideas. They tried to erase them. Entire libraries of Gnostic texts were destroyed. Entire communities were pushed underground. Owning certain writings could get you labeled a heretic, and being labeled a heretic in the ancient world was not a small thing. So why would anyone risk that? You have to sit with that question for a second, because it tells you something important. People don't risk their lives to protect boring ideas. They risk everything to protect ideas that threaten power. Two names matter here, and I want to give you just enough weight on each one so you understand why they still get quoted today. Valentinus was one of the most influential Gnostic teachers in early Christian history, so respected in his time that some accounts say he was nearly considered for a major church leadership role before his teachings were pushed to the margins. He didn't just believe in the Archons as abstract myth. He mapped out an entire cosmology of how the divine became fragmented, layer by layer, until it landed here, in matter, in flesh, in forgetting. Basilides was an early Alexandrian teacher who took things even further, describing multiple layers of ruling powers stacked between us and the true source, each one further from truth than the last. My honest take? I think the fact that this knowledge had to be hidden tells you more than the knowledge itself. Dangerous ideas don't get burned because they're wrong. They get burned because they work. Because if enough people started believing they were divine sparks trapped in a controlled system, rather than obedient followers of an all-powerful ruler who demanded fear and worship, that belief threatens every structure built on obedience. That thought alone should make the hair on your arms stand up a little. Because if they were willing to burn this once, what does that tell you about the being they said built the whole system in the first place? What if the God you were taught to fear wasn't the real one? Sit with that for a second, because this is the part that changes everything. In Gnostic teaching, there's a figure called the Demiurge. Not evil in the cartoon sense. Something closer to blind. A lesser creative force that shaped the material universe while genuinely believing it was the highest power in existence. Some texts describe the Demiurge as arrogant, proclaiming itself the only God, completely unaware that something vaster exists beyond it. Read that again. A creator so limited in its own awareness that it mistook itself for the ultimate truth. Here's my opinion, and I'll be honest, this is where the story stopped feeling like mythology to me and started feeling like a mirror. Because doesn't that sound familiar? Systems that convince you they are the whole world when they're actually just one small layer of it. Authorities, inside your own head or outside of it, that insist their rules are absolute law, when really they're just one limited voice claiming to be the only one. Does that feel familiar to you? Every time you've believed a thought was absolute truth just because it was loud. Every time a fear convinced you it was reality instead of just a signal. Every time an authority, a parent, a system, an inner voice told you this is just how things are, and you believed it without question. That's the Demiurge pattern. Not a devil with horns. A limited ruler mistaking its rules for the entire universe. And once you see that pattern, you start noticing something even stranger. Because a ruler that convincing doesn't just exist outside of you. It builds its walls on the inside too. I used to think prisons needed walls. I was wrong. Real prisons don't always look like prisons. Sometimes they look like your daily routine. Sometimes they look like the thought you have first thing, every single morning. Sometimes they look completely normal, which is exactly why they work. In Gnostic teaching, the Archons aren't just cosmic rulers floating somewhere far away. They're described as forces that shape human experience directly, through fear, through repetition, through identity, through desire. Let's go through these honestly, because each one deserves more than a quick mention. Fear is the first bar. Not big dramatic fear. Small, quiet fear that runs in the background of your day like a hum you've stopped noticing. Fear of not being enough. Fear of being seen too clearly. Fear of silence, because silence might let something uncomfortable surface. Repetition is the second bar. The same thought loop, the same argument replaying in your head, the same worry dressed in a new outfit every day. It feels like thinking. It's actually just circling. Ego identity is the third bar, and this one is sneaky. The belief that you are only the roles you play, your job, your name, your reputation, your past mistakes. Gnostic teaching suggests something underneath all of that, something the roles were never able to fully contain. But as long as you believe you are the mask, you'll defend the mask like it's your life. Time anxiety is the fourth. That constant low hum of not enough time, running out of time, behind on time. It keeps you sprinting instead of noticing. And desire, endless desire, is the fifth. Not desire itself, which is human and natural, but the endless, unsatisfied version. The version where getting the thing never actually satisfies you, so you're immediately reaching for the next thing. Here's my honest opinion. Out of all five, I think ego identity is the one that traps people the longest, because it feels the most like you. Fear you can sometimes catch yourself in. But identity? Identity feels like home. So you don't question it. You just live inside it. And the strangest part? These bars don't need force. Nobody has to lock you in. You do it yourself, one habit, one belief, one reaction at a time. Have you ever left a conversation feeling drained for no reason? Not because anything bad happened. Nobody yelled. Nothing dramatic occurred. But somehow you walked away feeling like something got siphoned out of you. There's an old esoteric idea buried in Gnostic thought that the Archons don't just control, they feed. Not blood, not anything physical. They're described as sustaining themselves on chaotic emotional states. Fear, panic, repetitive anxious energy, comparison. The kind of low-grade static most people live in without even realizing it's static. Now look at modern life for a second, and tell me this doesn't line up eerily well. Endless comparison built into every scroll of a feed. News cycles engineered around fear because fear keeps eyes locked on screens. Arguments online that spiral in circles, generating heat but never resolution. None of this needs a conspiracy to explain it. It's simply what happens when a system rewards attention, and fear is the fastest way to grab attention. I'll be honest with you about something personal here. There was a period where I noticed I felt more alive during small dramas, an argument, a worry spiral, a comparison trap, than during quiet, peaceful moments. That disturbed me when I first noticed it, because it meant some part of me had gotten used to chaos as a kind of fuel. Not because I wanted suffering, but because chaos felt more familiar than stillness. If that pattern feels familiar to you too, I want you to know you're not broken. You were shaped by an environment that rewards static. That's not a flaw in you. That's a design in the system. But here's the real question this leads to. If this really is the trap, what part of you was never able to be trapped in the first place? Here's the part nobody tells you. In Gnostic teaching, there's something inside every person that the Archons, the Demiurge, none of it, was ever actually able to touch. It's called the spark. In the original Greek, Pneuma, a fragment of the true divine source, dropped into matter, wrapped in flesh, wrapped in forgetting, but never actually owned by the system around it. Not created by the Demiurge, just trapped near it, like light passing through fog. The fog can obscure the light. It can bend it, scatter it, make it hard to see. But the fog never becomes the light, and it never actually stops the light from existing. This is the emotional center of the entire teaching, so let me be completely honest with you about how I feel about this part. I think this single idea, that no matter how deep the forgetting goes, something in you is never actually capturable, might be one of the most important spiritual claims ever written down. Not because it's comforting, because it's specific. It's not saying, everything will be fine. It's saying something concrete stayed untouched the entire time, even during your worst years, even during the years you didn't believe anything sacred could possibly still be inside you. Think about your lowest moment, the one you don't talk about often. According to this teaching, even there, especially there, that spark was still present. Not judging you, not disappointed in you, just present, waiting to be noticed rather than earned. That reframes everything, doesn't it? You were never trying to become something divine. You were trying to remember something you already were. This is the moment everything changes. Because once you understand there's a spark that was never actually owned by the system, a new question appears. If knowing about the Archons intellectually isn't enough, and it isn't, then what actually breaks the pattern? The Gnostic answer is a word you've probably heard before but maybe never fully unpacked. Gnosis. Direct knowing. Not belief. Not memorizing facts about spiritual systems. An actual felt recognition from the inside of what's real and what's just fog. Here's what that looks like in an ordinary day, not a mystical temple somewhere. It looks like catching a fear thought mid-loop and, instead of following it automatically, simply noticing, oh, this is the loop again. It looks like feeling the pull of comparison start to rise and recognizing it as static instead of truth. It looks like realizing an identity you've clung to for years is a role you've been playing, not the actual you underneath it. That moment of noticing, that's gnosis in action. Small, quiet, completely undramatic from the outside. But it is, according to this entire tradition, the actual key. Not a ritual, not a chant. Recognition. I want to be direct with you about my own opinion here, because I think this matters more than people realize. I don't think belief was ever the point. You can believe every word of this video and still be completely trapped, because belief lives in the head. Gnosis lives somewhere deeper. It's the difference between reading a map of a room and actually feeling the walls with your hands in the dark. So the real practice isn't memorizing Archon names or cosmic hierarchies. It's building the habit of noticing. Every single day, every single loop, every single moment the fog tries to convince you it's the whole sky. That noticing repeated enough times is what actually starts loosening the bars. Here's what I actually want you to walk away with. This isn't about memorizing the word Archon or being able to explain the Demiurge at a dinner party. It's about something much smaller and much harder. It's about the next time you catch yourself mid-loop, mid-fear, mid-comparison, mid-dash, this is just who I am, and you actually notice it happening in real time. That's it. That's the whole practice. Not enlightenment overnight. Just noticing, again and again, until noticing becomes a habit instead of an accident. Here's my honest, personal thought on all of this, and I mean it sincerely. I don't think this story was ever meant to make you feel small or hopeless. If anything, I think it's the opposite. Because once you can see the shape of the fog, it stops being able to convince you it's the whole sky. And that shift, quiet as it is where everything else starts. You don't need to change your whole life tonight. You just need to catch one loop tomorrow. One fear. One moment where something tried to pass itself off as the whole truth, when it was really just one small ruler pretending to be the only one. If any part of this actually landed for you, I want to know. So down in the comments, just write, I am awake. That's it. 2 words. Let me see how many of you are actually catching this. And if you want more of these deep dives into hidden and esoteric teachings, subscribe, because there's a lot more of this story still to tell. The spark was never gone. You just have to remember to look.